long-term strategies for a resilient Europe. I'm Heather Graby, Senior Fellow here at Bruegel, and I'm delighted to welcome two authors of recent reports on the long-term perspective. We've had a series of interconnected crises on the European continent over the past few years, which have rocked policymaking, often been quite catalytic in changing parameters that made really major policies possible. But of course, they are necessarily with a very short-term perspective, focusing on the needs of the moment and the financing that is available in the moment. These two reports that we're going to hear about today try and look longer term at Europe's priorities, what those priorities should be, how to get there in terms of policy, but also how to finance it. How do we pay for policies that will require the mobilization of both public and private sector funds over a much longer period of time? We don't need reminding, I think, of how short-termist political time horizons can be, always focused on the next election, which is only a few years away. But also corporate reporting cycles are very short, which means that companies often don't have enough of an incentive to invest for the long term. It takes a very far-sighted corporate leader to be able to make the case for longer-term investments that don't pay off immediately. Yet we're going to need system changes over the next years in order to stave off future crises. System changes in terms of climate and avoiding moving into a greener economy. Also system changes to cope with the economic security and competitiveness challenges that Europe faces, as well as the hard security ones. So it's great that we have an opportunity to hear directly from two thinkers who've been going very long term on this. We will start with Enrico Letta, who needs no introduction to the audience at Bruegel. Everybody has read his great report on the future of the single market. He has, of course, experience in politics, having been Prime Minister of Italy, as well as having a number of other ministerial roles. He's been an MEP here in Brussels, and of course he's had an illustrious academic career at a number of institutions, currently also at Sciences Po, for example, in Paris, and he's currently the president of the Jacques Delors Institute. So we're going to hear from him first on his report and his thoughts about the long term, both the strategy and also how to get there. And then we will turn to Bernard Attali, who has pursued a career between the public and private sectors. He's been at many different institutions, including Caisse des Dépôts. He's now a senior advisor to Auguste Debussy and EQT, but he's worked for a number of illustrious French companies. And he's also taught at ENA, Sciences Po, and New York University. So we'll have a chance to hear from him in a moment. But first, I'd like to start with Enrico Letta. We have had a number of conversations about your very interesting report since it was published in April. I'm curious to know also how you've received the response to it and whether you think European leaders are going to get serious about implementing your recommendations.
Thank you very much. I'm really very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to be here with you. I'm very pleased to be here with my old friend Bernard. I think we have to spoiler that we discussed together in the preparation of the two reports, and I would like to thank him for the support I received. I like very much the long term as time. And I would like to try to see my report, what the report says, how the report is welcomed or, I would say, not welcomed, through the key of the long term. Considering that the long term for me is very important for the preparation of the report. I was suggested by Delors himself 4 months before he passed away to try to, when I met him last time in September, to try to have a deep dive on the reasons why the single market is half integrated and half not integrated. And these reasons are long-term reasons. So long-term is not only for the future, but is also for the past, if I may say. And there are reasons why the single market is not integrated on 3+1, but I will focus on the three main subjects, main sectors that were today considered by all the observers, stakeholders, decision makers as crucial topics: energy, telecom, and financial services, not integrated, with this very strange paradox that today we are integrated. We are talking about a period of national sovereignism, in which the slogan, the most, I would say, used slogan is again the 16 UK slogan on take back control, and this take back control is today, ça fait des ravages in Europe. In reality, what for me it's a little bit paradoxical is the fact that today we are integrated in the theoretically the most complicated issue in terms of national sovereignty, in terms of national flag. That is the currency. We have the same currency. It would have been very easy for me to answer in the 80s when I was a student in European affairs, at the end of the 80s, the question, which will be the most complicated sector to integrate? No doubt at all to answer the currency, because the symbolism, the emblematic symbolism of the currency is so big that it was not complicated to answer the currency. What for me today, and also in the journey around Europe to present the report, not only to prepare the report, the second journey I had in Eastern European countries, in Western European countries, South, North, I have the feeling that this topic of it's so strange that we have the same currency and no problem at all in having the same currency. 75% of European citizens are happy with that. And we are fighting to keep each country our own national supervisory authority on financial services. And I think 98% of our population think that we are already integrated on that. And in reality, it is not the case, because we have on financial markets, national financial markets, and we have the same currency. So my point is that the long term is important to understand what happened before. So we had an acceleration on the currency, but we weren't able to accelerate on the other three. And today we are still, I would say, fighting, and the report is part of this fight, to try to convince people that in reality this national dimension on the financial markets, on telecom, on energy is the best way to make Wall Street happy, to make the Chinese happy, to make Indians happy. All our competitors are happy because of our fragmentation. And my report is trying to give examples on how we are losing ground. We are giving gift to all these countries in terms of jobs creation. We are helping job creation in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Turkey, South Korea. We are very generous. The others are not so generous with us, but we are very generous. We are, with the money to support Ukraine, we created such a long list of jobs in America, in South Korea, and Turkey, because we don't have a united, integrated defense industry of defense system. So, with the need to buy immediately, we were obliged to buy out of Europe. And the same for the financial services. We have a system where, at the end of the day, we are becoming more and more a colony of the US in financial terms. So And I have a lot of examples. I have limited time, so I want to try to end up by saying that the reaction to my report and what happened in the last months, I am happy because von der Leyen took the report and also Draghi's report and put the report both in the speech that she gave at the European Parliament to get the confidence vote, and she put the report in the roadmaps that she gave to the commissioners, to the 26 commissioners. So now the different proposals in the report are part of the daily job of the relationship between Commission and Parliament and Council. So I know that the Polish presidency is working for the next presidency and the Danish one for next year to implement it. So I have positive expectations because of that. Positive expectations because von der Leyen took also some brands. One, the most important one, is the Savings and Investments Union. So the idea to move from the old Capital Markets Union to a Savings and Investments Union, where the key point is the point on how to find political energy to invest in integration of financial markets, because we need political energy. Until now, we didn't have enough political energy, and we continued working on the integration of financial markets in a sort of circular way, saying that financial markets are for financial people. And in reality, financial markets and effective and integrated financial markets are for the people, not for financial people, are for the real economy, are for the big purpose to finance the transition. And this is the feeling of the Savings and Investments Union. And I was very happy because she took also the idea of the 28th virtual state, this sort of idea of a European Delaware that I put in the report. So the idea to say it's politically unfeasible to fight against the defense of each country on its own corporate law, to establish one European corporate law. But it is possible to build up one European corporate law as option that we give to the different companies, with the idea that that can work in an optional way on this idea of a 28th virtual state, a sort of European Delaware. This approach that can be, in my view, a very wise one, is the way to overcome the national obstacles in a European perspective, with the idea to be more efficient and to be more competitive. Of course, the report has many other aspects. The fifth freedom is another big point of discussion. The freedom to stay, so all the discussion about peripheric areas, the future of the cohesion policies, and of course the integration also on telecom and energy markets that are other key issues. I end up maybe with one final point, that is, because in the last 2 weeks we were all discussing about a stress test for the future of the single market. The stress test is, as the beginning of the single market was an Italo-German beginning, because at the end of the day everything started in Stuttgart. It's not very well known, but in Stuttgart in '83 there was a declaration by the two Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Genscher and Colombo, at the palace of the Baden-Württemberg Minister President. And this declaration in '83 was the beginning of the journey to have l'acte unique and giving to the law the possibility to and just to say, now we have another Italo-German interesting test, that is the Unicredit Commerzbank issue. And my point is here not to support one or the other. I'm here just to say one point, and I use this audience to repeat it. Please, when we talk about this very interesting stress test, that can be a first interesting stress test for, I hope, a long sequence of that, stop naming it as cross-border merger, because we don't have borders within the European Union. It is not a cross-border merger. If there's a merger between, I would say, a Banque de Bretagne with the Banque de Normandie, we will never say it's a cross-border a cross-border merger. And there's no border between Italy and Germany. So it is a European merger, not a cross-border merger. I was impressed by all this discussion about the cross-border merger between Commerzbank and Unicredit, and hostile, like Unicredit was a Chinese one. It's an intra-European deal, and they discuss. They are free to discuss, and the market will decide, not the politicians. I think it's a very interesting point, and I stop here on that. I'm ready to answer all your questions, and of course to hear Bernard.
Thank you very much, Enrico. Fantastic to hear also your reflections on how the report has been received and is now being used. And it is notable how often it's referred to in the mission letters to the new commissioners. Quite a few of them have responsibilities taken from it, and having that analysis to underpin the new agenda is a great advantage. I do wonder, though, about the name of the 28th regime, because surely it should be the zero regime. It should be the ground floor on which the 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 27 regimes are built, rather than a 28th on top. So I give you that image of the architecture of financial services in Europe. So just one question to ask about this is about thinking longer term. It's great that you've written a report which is clearly having an impact on the mandate of this commission for 5 years. But ultimately, you really want your report to have an impact over 20 years. The Delors report, or if you think about the single market program, that was a 10-year program. The advantage of making policy and doing planning at European level is you're not subject to the 4 or 5 year electoral cycles. There are 5-year cycles for the terms of the institutions, but it's possible also to have multi-term planning. So what would you like people to be taking from your report that has not yet been implemented in 20 years' time? What are the elements that you think will take more than one term to deliver, that the next commission will also have to take forward?
But of course, the most complicated one will be defense, because defense is the only one where we are working on treaty aspects in a different way with the rest. The rest is without any treaty change. I wanted to present a report where we can land, we can implement. Everything is written in the report without any treaty change. And I wanted to have it not to be accused to say, okay, you are a dreamer about European integration, federalism, and so on. No, it's everything can be done with the present treaties. Because I have to say also that present treaties are very powerful. They showed this powerful during COVID, and also during the Russian aggression, the first part of the Russian aggression to Ukraine. So we have powerful treaties if there's political will, and the if is a big if, of course. But the key point is defense, of course, is more complicated. But at the same time, it can be the point where some creativity can be successful. For instance, I can refer to the fact that the part of my report that was not, I would say, in my view, under attention or good scrutiny, is the part on where I propose to use the ESM for defense, for instance. And I take the opportunity here to relaunch the point. Because I strongly believe that defense, there's a problem on how to finance defense. We have to find common ways to finance defense. And we have there a tool that is there, very well working, good people. Gramegna is a very good banker there. And we are not able to use it. Is in a corner. I know also because of my country, because the lack of ratification from my country. But why don't we use the ESM for the purpose why we had the ESM? The ESM is there for emergencies, and we are in an emergency on defense, on how to find the way to finance defense needs and so on. So it's a little bit creative idea, but why don't we use this idea? So it's a proposal. There are other aspects. Of course, there are many other points of the report that I would like to. The fifth freedom is something that has a very long-term perspective. But for instance, on the three sectors, telecom, energy, and financial markets, I wanted to put a 5 years strategy. And in the report, you find a roadmap with 5 years for the three. And if we are able to be, we say, compliant with this strategy, I think we can be successful at the end of this legislature. And my point is that we need to be successful at the end of this legislature. I end up by saying that I don't want to hope to have an external need, an external help, an external federator. But yes, because we can have a very strong and powerful external federator in the next American president. I hope not to have an American president to have external federator, because I hope to have good relationship with the US and in continuity with what happened. But it is clear that there's this possibility and we have to be ready.
Thank you very much. So on this issue of financing for the future, Bernard Attali and his commission have produced this report on investing for the long term, a short-term emergency, which puts forward both ideas of the size, the scale of the financing that's needed. I think you want 7 trillion euro over the next 7 years. We've had Mario Draghi's estimates as well of financing needs. But you also propose how to do this financing, how to mobilize savings and investment. So similar ideas that we really have got to stop this money flowing out of the European Union to be invested in US financial markets and in US companies, the generosity of Europe that Enrico Letta suggested perhaps we can't afford for too much longer. So Bernard, we're very interested in the findings of your commission and particularly this issue of how do you get the long-term savings?
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to apologize because of my English. I'm a little bit rusty in English. If I speak French, some of you will not understand. But if I speak English, most of you will not understand. So I just wanted to apologize. I will be short because everything I have to say is totally in line with what Enrico, my good old friend Enrico, just said and drafted in his report. Actually, yes, we were more focused on the financial sector in the report we published with the Caisse des Dépôts at the request of Eric Lombard, when we had to discuss the general landscape of financing in Europe and the long-term investment in Europe in 22, first report, which has been updated recently. When you look at all the reports we have on the table, that is to say, Letta, Draghi, Noyer, and even Monsieur de la Rosière, all are painting a dark picture because Europe is falling behind the United States in very crucial matters like technologies, for instance. We know that resources are not endless. We know it is the end of the easy money. We know that the budget in Europe are constraints. So, and we know that there is a huge amount to invest if we want to tackle the energy transition issue, if we want to get to normal sovereignty in defense, as Enrico just mentioned, and others. So to get there, we need to completely rethink the financing model which has been established so far on fragmented capital market, on excessive debt and money creation. And that's why we try to list some of the measures which should be taken in the future, just to make sure that Europe savings is well oriented. Because good news is that Europe saves. You probably know that European saving surplus over domestic investment amounted to about 370 billion. That is to say 2.6% of GDP. Or, and a lot of this savings is invested outside Europe, mainly in the US. So we have to redirect these savings in a more effective manner. Just to take one concrete example, we should create a European label for saving products invested in Europe, as it has been recommended in most of the reports I just mentioned. Finally, we also should have creative ideas, innovative ideas. For instance, monetary policy could also play a role, particularly through the implementation of differentiated interest rates for the refinancing for bank loans when allocated to energy transition priorities. Just an idea. And just a final note to mention that we in Europe have a very strong network of semi-public authorities and financing tools which should be leveraged in a more efficient way.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting point you made there at the end. There have been all other calls also for basically special rules for transition finance, for finance towards the green transition in particular. For example, Bruegel did a paper on whether that's something that central banks should themselves organize to reduce the green premium and also to reduce the risk aversion of European investors. There's also been talk about, for example, in the reform of public procurement rules that the Commission is going to put forward, that cost competitiveness criteria should not be the most important. There should also be other criteria, non-cost criteria, including the green transition. So how do you see this? Is it that the green transition is still seen as too risky by very risk-averse European investors? Or is it that they don't get a strong enough signal that it's really going to happen, and therefore basically banks are then willing to go into that?
Well, actually, the problem is deeper than that. I often wonder whether behind the preference for short term is not linked to demography, because it's common knowledge that Europe is aging. A number of people over 65 is projected to be over 30% of the European population by the end of the century, when it is today around 20%. And of course, an elderly population tends to be risk adverse. So the problem is not only a financial problem, it's also a demographic problem.
The 65s perhaps are thinking about shorter term returns for their own pensions, but also just more risk averse.
Exactly.
Oh, very interesting. I think that would be a great research project for Bruegel. We need to look into this, the demographic impact on risk aversion. And also, I'm very interested in what you had to say about leveraging public funds and the role of national promotional banks. Is that something that you would see being organized at EU level? I mean, Enrico Letta was just pointing out that the problem is that financial regulation is too national. But would you see promotional banks as something that could be European level too?
Definitely, yes, because this is a strength we have. This is an asset we have in Europe. a network of strong, solid promotional bank all around Europe, and definitely we should leverage this semi-public or public money in a more efficient way, because public money is a catalyst for private funds.
Yes, indeed, especially for de-risking for private funds. So we're going to come to questions now. Those of you online can put your questions on Slido with the hashtag strategy. So just go on to Slido and you can immediately use that strategy, that hashtag. But I'm going to start with those in the room. I'm sure that that's a question. I've never known a Bruegel event in which we've not started. The hashtag is strategy for those who wish to bring it online. So if not, I have another question simply about your own sense of how the near future looks. How optimistic are you about this commission? And whether this next commission, given the political constraints, given the shift in terms of more far-right parties getting into power in the European Parliament, but also at national level, which will affect the Council, given also all of the constraints, both the funding constraints we've just discussed, but also the political constraints, how optimistic are you?
I put on the table one plus and one minus. And at the end of the day, I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. And the plus is the fact that it was not given for granted to have today, October the 2nd, the President of the Commission totally legitimated by a strong vote by the Parliament, the commissioners there, ready to pass the hearings at the European Parliament, and the Commission ready to start. Many of the observers in April, before the European elections, when I presented the report, were saying that it will be the most messy post-European elections ever. Who will be the president, with which majority, which support, which commission. And frankly speaking, this is a plus. It was a very, very ordered and very well-working preparation. The top jobs are there, the agreement is there, the majority in Parliament is there, and the Commission is there. So that's a plus. Of course, there's a minus, and the minus is that there are many, last one in Austria last Sunday, signals coming from the ground that there's a very complicated issue, and the complicated issue is that there's everywhere in Europe 20, 30, 40% of people voting for anti-European parties. These anti-European parties are not able to agree among them on anything. And that is, of course, consequence of being populistic and anti. So there's a long list of groups in the European Parliament. So there's a sort of lack of capacity to be active, but their destructive capacity is very big. So this is a minus, and of course it depends on the way in which everything will go. But the other main point is that this commission has cohesion, more cohesion from the previous one, comparison with the previous one, and the program is very clear. So I have some expectations, but of course the main problem is there, and we know very well that is the first time probably in the political European life that we have both France and Germany together at the same time in domestic dire straits. And that is maybe the first time that happens. I don't remember, because we had always a situation in which one was weak, the other one was strong. Today they are both weak, and that has consequences probably.
Actually, yes, Enrico, you are totally right. I think the main problem, you raised the main problem. So far, most of Europe was driven by a couple. was the French political will and the German economical solidity. And today we have not a real solid balance in the political landscape in France, and Germany is in bad shape. So I am not so optimistic as you are, given the two problems which has to be overcome in the coming months and years.
Indeed, the Franco-German motor hasn't turned electric fast enough, we could say, spluttering away, sending up diesel fumes, it seems. So we've got a few questions on Slido, and we've got a good one in the room. So I'll take two in the room first, and then we'll come to Slido. Just remind us who you are.
Hello, my name is David Pincus. I work here at Bruegel. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. Both of your reports mention the need for new financial products at the European level to unlock household savings for long-term projects. Now, a theoretically good match for long-term projects would be pension savings and also insurance products. But pension policy is firmly in national hands. And also the tool that is often used to entice people to save for the long term, which is tax incentives. How important do you think these different tax regimes are in preventing a large European level capital pool for long-term savings? And what can the next Commission do to address these? Thank you very much.
Maybe I could just add to that point one of the questions on Slido, which is quite relevant to this, which is how can the Savings and Investment Union be created when there are substantial divergences in saving cultures in individual member states? So we have the diversity of pension systems and the fact they're not, but then we also have differences in the culture of how people think about saving for the long term.
The point is very true, and the problem is very true. But I think we can try to have political agreements. So the point is that we have to overcome differences in terms of rules because of the treaties, but we can try to have political agreements because if not, countries, Germany, if not Germany, knows that she would be obliged to put public money on the table. So the only way to try to start with private money is to be able to build up the Savings and Investments Union. And this is what I'm saying every moment I visit Germany, and I clearly say that look, it is not something against you, it's something that you have to buy. Because if you buy this idea, you can avoid what is today, I know it's an elephant in the room in the German political debate, that is how to finance with public money the common goods or the common needs. And in my view, and this is the proposal the Savings and Investments Union, is the way to use private money to leverage public money. Exactly what Bernard just said before. Because if I may find a nuance of problem in what we had as a fantastic achievement, that was Next Generation EU. Next Generation EU has two main problems. First is too much public money based, and is too much national projects based. And so the future has to be a future in which we bridge private and public money, as the Juncker plan did. The Juncker plan, in my view, was a very, very good important signal, and having not only domestic and national projects, but European projects with different countries involved. That can be the other main point. But your point on taxes is absolutely right, that this is why we need political will, and this is why it's a topic where the European Council has to be involved. It's not just a technical problem, it's a European Council problem.
Yeah, then I think you've answered one of the other questions on Slido, which was, how to maintain public trust in public spending if money seems to be misallocated or if funds are not even spent. It's remarkable how in some countries the Next Generation EU funds were actually not spent as well. Bernard, what were your views on this?
What Enrico said. This is not a fiscal issue. This is not even a technical issue. It's a political issue. Because there are very different cultures about retirement. There are different cultures about savings. We have the same problem within our country between la capitalisation et la répartition. And probably the Europe level is a good level to make progress on that field to find a good product for European consumers.
Okay, we have another question in the room. Just there, and then still one here.
Thank you very much. Thomas Mellor-Nielsen at Euractiv. I have two questions for Mr. Letta, although I'll be very keen to get other panelists' views on this as well. So one question is about the very long-term perspective. So I was very struck shortly after the publication of your report, Mr. Letta, when you went to the United States and you said ultimately Europe should strive for I think you called it a transatlantic single market. And I was wondering, is this something that you still believe? And if so, how long do you think this could take? And do you think this is feasible if Donald Trump is re-elected US president? And then the second question is more a clarificatory question. I think you said right now the European Union is a financial colony of the United States, and I was wondering whether you could elaborate a bit on that. And also whether, if there was a transatlantic single market, whether that might exacerbate Europe's financial colonization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The two questions are, of course, linked. I think we are becoming more and more a colony in financial terms. I don't see, of course, colony is a provocation in terms of, but I would like to be heard on that. How do you, I would say, explain with other words the following aspect? When we have in Europe financial digital transaction among consumers, European consumers on the European ground, and you have the same financial transaction among American consumers on the American ground, on the European ground among European consumers, you do so through American platforms. And you have only the choice among which American platform you choose. On the American side, you do the same on American platforms. It is not just a point of money, but money, it matters. Can you imagine how much is the total amount of fees of these digital transactions? Billion of digital transaction under an American umbrella in Europe among European consumers on the European ground. But it's a question also on data. On data, these American platforms are owners of all our data, and we are a colony on that. I don't know the figures, but I think it's around maybe 90% is in this, and I think it's a colony. It's a colony. And what is for me strange is that all the different countries, there's a race to raise our national flag, our national pride. It's like colonies raising our, I would say, flag as colonies. But we are colonies. The only way to avoid being colony is to be together. Then we have the dimension to avoid being a colony. And in what I'm saying, there's nothing of anti-American, exactly because I also put in my report the proposal of a transatlantic single market. And I strongly believe that this idea is not a provocation, it's not for 20 years, something that we should do very soon, because the rest of the world is challenging us. And the rule of law, our values, the democratic values are challenged. And what is happening in part of the world is a challenge. And we have to defend our values. I have no doubts on that. And this is why I think that we have to discuss with the US on that. And the other part of your question is, of course, it depends on the result of the elections. And that is another very paradoxical situation of this, because we are, all our policies, and I think the idea to postpone the starting of the next commission after the American election is not a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. And so these months moving, because at the end of the day, this vote of this 500,000 of people from Nebraska, from Michigan, and so on, will be very important for us. It will be crucial for us. So I think it's part of this problem. So I don't think that with Trump it will be possible to have any transatlantic single market. I think with Harris we can open the discussion, and it would be interesting if we, but of course we can open the discussion if we are not a colony. So we have to work on our side to leave the status of colony, for instance, on the financial system, and to raise, so we have to integrate, to raise the level, and then we can try to discuss.
So Bernard, how do we do the financial decolonization of Europe?
I just wanted to put it that way. For me, the difference between Americans and Europeans is the difference between friends and family. In Europe, we are family members. America is a friend. It's a different, in my view.
Thank you. I'd like to put forward one of the questions on Slido about sustainable finance and how to make sustainable finance a bigger part of Savings and Investment Union. You know, there's European Green Guarantee, there's green bonds, but there are many areas where it's really quite hard still for companies to get credit to invest in the transition. In the Letta report, for example, there's a whole section on the circular single market and the market failures which have caused good investments not to be made because of first mover disadvantages, because the secondary markets for materials are not there, but also because simply firms can't get the credit in order to do this, to make this transition, even if they would actually get returns quite rapidly. So how to tackle this issue? Is this something that needs a systemic response?
I know that Bruegel is starting discussing on that and having a deep dive, so I would be more than interested in having the outcome of your work, because I strongly believe that it is crucial, because the transition can be done only if we are able to raise this private money part of the job. Otherwise, it would be, in my view, a failure, for a very simple reason. The failure is for political reasons. I was in my first and in my second journey around Europe, first journey from September to April, and the second one from April to now to present the report. The first one was to prepare the report. I was impressed by one point, because we are here discussing about how to finance the common goods, how to Draghi's report had this target of 800 billion euros. It is a topic. It became a topic as top. The point is how to fulfill. And my feeling, and I would like to share my feeling with you, and please tell me very frankly if I'm saying something is not wise, but my feeling is that there's a lack of discussion in Europe on that. It is not a topic. It is not the topic that it deserves to be, because it is the most important, in my view. We have all this money to find, and nobody is looking for this money. Is a very general, very on the clouds. Why? I try, I would say, an answer to this question, why is so on the clouds? For a very simple reason. All the political debate is national, and at national level, in reality, we don't have political conflict on that for a very simple reason. Because you have the big member states and the small member states, they are all without a conflict on this topic, because the conflict is not left and right. The conflict is northern countries and southern countries. And within countries, left and right agree. I give you the example in the political debate in Italy, in France, tell me if I'm wrong, in Spain, in Portugal, the idea is that we have to relaunch a new next generation EU. We have to have maybe adjusted with more ambition, but the key point is that we have to use this example to finance the transition. And left and right, without big exceptions, agree on that. So it is not a conflict. There's not an internal conflict. In the discussion that France is having today for the formation of the government, there is no discussion on that, because all they agree on that. In Italy is the same. In Spain is the same. But if you move to Germany, to the Netherlands, to Sweden, you don't have any political debate within these countries, because they all agree, left and right, that next generation EU was once in a lifetime. So no way to have another one. And the main point is that we have to finance these common goods with public national money, keeping it national, and without mixing it with the others, and private money. So it is clear that we need to work on this cleavage, and the cleavage is geographical or, well, I don't know how to explain it, but it's clearly this cleavage, and it is very complicated because we continue not to open this discussion, and I'm waiting the moment in which the discussion will be opened, because it will be the crucial moment of the legislature.
Yes, and we have a related question to this actually online from E3G about how much in your report you focused on the diversity within the EU, and particularly the lagging behind regions and cohesion policy and so on. Now, we know the EU budget at 1% of GDP, of which only part of it, only about a fifth of it, is actually spent on cohesion in various forms. That's not going to have a macroeconomic impact, but it can have an impact on specific areas if it's well spent. So how to focus the budget? It's likely that the next budget there'll be quite a radical reform of it. Already, not only Ursula von der Leyen, but also in the mission letter of the Budget Commissioner, the signalling that the Commission will go for a radical reform. Member States are another question. It often takes a long time, and it's only at 5 minutes to midnight that they finally decide on this. Are either of you hopeful that more cohesion funding at EU level could have this could help to bridge the gap, or would it be other factors that do so? Yeah, just speak into it.
As far as I'm concerned,
Speak directly.
I thought that social cohesion, regional cohesion, is a prerequisite, and even the most liberal economists today agree on the idea that you can't have growth long term, you can't have solid economies if you don't have social cohesion behind it. So I was years ago chairman of the European Regional Committee, Planning Committee, which was in charge of the European Fund for Regional Economic Planning, and I can assure you that these funds were crucial in the way we had to implement the European cohesion at that time.
I wanted to put this point in the report, the point about the future of cohesion policy, not only because of the law. The law always said there's no single market without cohesion and solidarity and convergence. And that was, it is not by chance that all the structural funds story started aside with the single market in the moment in which Spain and Portugal entered the European Union. But in reality, there's something more. And this something more is the fact that I had, once again, because of my journey, I had the feeling, and from here, I didn't have the feeling on how this point was crucial and bloody and complicated. And it is the topic of the asymmetric internal mobility within the European Union. The fact that in reality we have a lot of mobility, but one-way ticket from east to west and from south to north. And if you have 20 years of this one-way ticket internal mobility, you are starting suffering everywhere in Europe, not only in the origin countries. They are suffering. I met a lot of ministers, a lot of professors, rectors of universities telling that you are killing us. You are attracting all our best talents. Nobody will stay here and nobody come here. With of course, the consequence of that. But also in the, I would say, the attractive part of Europe. I think, for instance, the victory of Wilders, such a spectacular victory of Wilders in the Netherlands, is also partially because of the cost of housing, that the impressive number of students coming from everywhere today in the Netherlands is obliging Dutch people to live in another level of cost of living. And I think these topics are topics that are today different than what we had 10 years or 20 years ago. And it is not possible today to avoid these topics because we had in France the Gilets jaunes. I was very, very happy to be in France during the Gilets jaunes story. But it was, for me, very interesting to understand why, where, and the origin of everything there. And to say that nothing was ideologically there. It was not an ideological movement. It was a very concrete, and it was linked to the fact that there's this feeling that we are far from the centers, far from the opportunities, far from the services, far. And this idea to be far, in the moment in which, because of that, you are close to everything, is something that is explosive, socially and in terms of personal behaviors. And I think we have to take into consideration this aspect because populists are using this I would say, dramatic situations to take vote without knowing how to use this vote, because they, at the end of the day, they are divided in the European Parliament, so they are without any possibility to be concrete. But this is a key point. This is why some of the solutions I try to put in the report, a new, I would say, thinking about the general overview on the services of general interest, for instance, is for me something that is crucial, theoretically, but also very concretely. That is a very good, interesting challenge for the next Commission.
Excellent. Okay, time for one last quick question, and then we will have to wrap up. Here in the front.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Gabriel Gil. I'm from Deloitte, and I would like to ask Mr. Letta, going back to fiscal policy and the needs of public funding, how do you see the proposal of Mr. Draghi to do an emission of common debt, EU common debt? I think it's a bit tricky, but...
I agree. I totally agree. In my view, it's a good point. It's a good starting point. of course, we have to convince all the member states, and this is the difficult part of the job. But I strongly agree.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for giving us some long-term perspective on all of this at the start of this next term. We'll have to invite you back in 5 years' time to give your views on how well it's all been implemented. Long-term is 20 years. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Absolutely. Well, Bruegel will certainly be here. Maybe not in this building, but we will invite you all back. So it only remains for me to invite you to thank our panelists for a great debate.